Hey, folks, welcome back to the Priory podcast. My name is Dave Jackson. Welcome to episode 19 of the Priory. So, before I introduce our next guest, just some quick housekeeping. I'll be taking about a month off, a little summer break from the podcast. And again, folks, I so appreciate you guys watching these videos. I enjoy making them. I appreciate your feedback. This has been great fun. I'll be taking a break for about a month. So, this is like a finale episode, and we got a banger here, folks. We got a real banger. So, this gentleman toured in 83, 85, and 87. He's got 4 Rogers in the MC category. Back in the day, we used to have a category called MC, Master of Ceremonies. He also has 3 Wilcos in the non-musical potpourri category. He's also a Golden Roger recipient. He performed for the great Bob Hope. If you were a competitor at the Worldwide Talent Competition in the 80s and the early 90s, there's a good chance this guy brought you on stage. He introduced your act. So please welcome, he's a legend in the Tops of Blue community. Please welcome the one and only, the great Mr. Ed Knox. On you. All right, Ed Knox, thank you so much for coming on the Priory with me. Ed, I apologize so much for the 24-hour rain delay, which really wasn't to do anything with rain.
No problem. Did you have a lot of wet? Did you have a lot of wetness where you are? Did you get a
Oh,
big?
it's like England here.
Yeah.
I might as well be in Bentwaters or Woodbridge or someplace.
Are you in Pittsburgh or where are
Yeah,
you?
just north of Pittsburgh. Yeah, up here in Butler County, up here in Butler.
Yeah, I grew up in the middle of Pennsylvania, Williamsport area.
Oh, nice. Oh, very cool.
Yeah.
So I got to tell you something before I even start with my list of questions I over here on my left. And I know you're not going to remember this, but I tell the story at least once a week, and it has to do with you.
Oh God.
When you introduced me in the 1991 talent competition, and I'm
Yeah.
gonna give you a hint here.
Okay.
My piece I called it a Romulan Night. Do you remember how you came out and introduced that act?
I unfortunately I just don't. I don't.
Probably don't. I wouldn't. That doesn't surprise me. You've done a lot of stuff in your life. I get that. This is what happened. You came out in your Star Trek tunic, which I believe was red, and you came out and you said, "This is so great." I'm sitting over in the dark, over on stage left. You're in the middle, and you said, "You come out." You had your red Star Trek tunic on, looked very real, and you said, "Kirk, Spock, and McCoy, and Ensign Leibowitz beam down to the planet. Which one dies first?"
That's, now that you say that, I remember that.
Yeah, I tell that story that's probably one of my favorite worldwide stories is
Uh,
how you introduced my act. That was so great.
that time period, the 80s and then the 90s, because I was emceeing, well, Tom called me after I had won it in 80, 81 through 85. Then I think I took a year off, came back in 87, finished. I don't even think I was in the MC category. It's a long story, but uh, then I think the next year they stopped having MC. And
Oh,
so Tom would just bring us in and we would just MC and we MC every single act. So
mhm.
you were at Minot, right? Was that
No,
Minot?
I wasn't at Minot. No, no.
Where was
It
that?
was mine were both in Florida.
Florida. So it was
Yeah.
probably then at McDill or somewhere. Yeah.
Tyndall and what's the other base there? Tyndall
Yeah.
and not McDill.
No, I know where you're talking
Yeah.
because that's where my 83 was down at Tyndall or down in that
Mhm,
area down there. And
mhm.
that was when I made my first tour. So it was yeah, that was a great time though, because the contest, it's so funny. I talk to people about this all the time. Tops and Blue, I remember when we toured, it was the only game in town. You'd go overseas, and it was the only game in town.
Mhm.
There'd be a line outside. We'd go to Torrejon, and they'd say, can we have 2 shows?"
Right,
And they'd fill it up. And because there was no YouTube, there was no, I mean, people
right.
could they didn't have this. You had nothing. And
You
so
either had the NCO club, the rec center, or if Thompson Blue came in town,
yeah.
or the bowling alley.
I get it that as time went on, but I thought some of the comments later on, the way people just kind of attacked the program,
Yeah,
were really out of line. I mean, yeah, things happen, and technology was evolving, everything was evolving, and it was hard for Thompson Blue to keep up.
yeah,
But but I think at the time, wow, it was pretty amazing,
yeah,
and be a part of that. I was in the gold. We were the golden time, right? That was
yeah.
just the
I would
awesome.
agree.
Yeah.
Yep, I would agree. What before we get into anything blue and blue peripheral and adjacent, I want to hear a little bit about your origin story you know
About I'm sorry, my what?
your origin story, where you grew up. What were your dreams? What were your aspirations? Did you know you're going to go in the military? Did you know you're going to go in as an officer? What did you study in college? That type of thing.
Well, I grew up in Pennsylvania. When I grew up, my dad went to the Citadel, Military College, South Carolina,
Okay.
and so we moved around. He wasn't in the military, but he worked as an engineer, and they were building interstate highways. So when I was in seventh grade, I'd been to seven different schools.
Hmm.
And I tell people it's because my dad couldn't keep a job. No, but it wasn't. He just, because the high interstate highways, they were building bridges all over the country.
Mhm.
So we finally moved to Pennsylvania, and they wanted to move to a small town where we could grow up and I could play football or basketball or whatever it was that I wanted to do. And so we found this little town, Muncie, Pennsylvania. It's just outside of Williamsport, which is Little League World Series. That's where that
Mhm.
is. And I got there in seventh grade, and and I spent the rest of my time. I was always the new kid. Nobody ever moved there when we lived there. I was the new kid. I'm still the new kid. I go back now. I'm still the new kid, right? It's
Right,
like
right,
everybody
right.
lived there forever. And so, and then I was an exchange student. I went to South America, went to Bolivia for a year. And that was
Wow.
something I really wanted to do. And I did that. And I came back, made up my senior year. And at that time, I really hadn't thought about it, but my dad had gone to see the Citadel play in Annapolis in football. And so when he saw that, he kind of got me interested in the academies because I knew there was no way I was going to the Citadel. I said, there's
Right,
nothing going to happen.
right.
So I ended up applying to go to the Air Force Academy. I went to prep school for a year, then I went to the Air Force Academy, graduated. And I did not know. I mean, I didn't have any strong desire to fly or to do any of that stuff.
Right.
I went to the academy just to see if I could do it. And
Oh, interesting.
after about 2 years, I realized I could do it. And then that was hard because when you're there, you kind of want to be there. And I really didn't want to be there, but I'm glad I stayed. And then I got into the Air Force and I went into acquisition, which was kind of a crazy field. And so that set me up to Hanscom. And when I got to Hanscom, I didn't know anything about Air Force entertainment or anything, but I got up there and we were building communication systems. But I walked into the rec center
Hmm.
and I saw something about the Air Force talent contest or something. And I don't remember the woman's name, but there was an older woman that worked there. And I said, tell me about this. And she goes, well, it's a talent contest. I said, well, I'm a comedian. She goes, are you funny? I said, well, I
It's a
don't know.
legitimate question, Ed. It's a
I just,
legitimate question.
right? Just tell me a joke.
Yeah.
And so, because that's what, and I said something. She goes, I don't know. I don't think you're very funny. So, but we had the talent contest there, and I learned about Tops and Blue, and a good friend of mine who also graduated from the academy, Music Express, 1982, was looking for some people and she called him and ended up going as a vocalist. And so she did. And her tour, that was kind of a rough tour for her because she kind of went in the middle and those Music Express tours were very, very different.
Mm.
But she enjoyed it and got to do her thing. And so I got involved in Air Force Talent and every step of the way was so cool. I don't know if you know Bruce Campbell or not, but
I do know. I not person. I know of Bruce. Yeah, yeah.
Bruce is just a phenomenal singer. I remember when I went to our base talent show. So Pease Air Force Base, they had a band and they came down and did our show. So
Oh,
we had like this terrific band that was playing. And Bruce came out And I still remember this. He came out and he had his tops. He'd traveled, I think his tops in blue 79 or 78 or something like that. And he came out in this white suit. I'd never seen, he looked like one of the Temptations, he walks
Right.
out
Right.
and he sang Say You by the Whispers.
Oh.
And he killed it. I listen to that song to this day. And I mean, then he had some voice problems and just couldn't, all through the talent contest, he had to kind of bail. He couldn't, he competed, but he just couldn't get it back. But I
Mm.
remember watching him going, oh my gosh. And then he was like, Ed, you got to go. You got to keep going. So we got to Worldwide, and that was in Wright-Patterson. And then I won. I won as MC. That was when I met TA. And that, you heard some of those stories, but
Yeah.
I will share this with you real quick. But so I met TA, we get to Worldwide and but I didn't know who he was. But people that knew him were like, yeah, that guy right there, that's TA. He's the competition. And so I was in my officer uniform and nobody knew who I was.
Uh,
So he said, and everybody, they were making all these command announcements. We got to Wright-Patterson, and they were like, okay, I got a note here from ATC, good luck from General Johnson, and you got a note from AFSC, good luck from, Colonel so-and-so.
right.
So I walked out front, I said, I had my uniform, I said, yeah, I have a note here for ATC. And they all looked up and said, uh, yeah, pack your bags and go home before you embarrass yourselves. And that was my first intro to TA. And
Wow.
he and from that moment, we kind of had this great rivalry. But anyway, I went back and got back into the Air Force, and then the talent contest came coming up. But at one point, I decided I really wanted to just try to get a career in the Air Force. But when I got to LA Air Force Base, I went from Hanscom to LA.
Wow.
We were doing satellite systems, launch vehicles. And it just, my commander, I needed a new job and he wasn't for me. So on a lark, I was a little bummed out. So I just went and did the base talent contest that year. I had no intention. This is 1987. Had
Right.
no intention of going tops and blue. That would have been my third tour. And the General Casey was there. He came to the show. He lived right across from the rec center. And he came up to me and he said, you need to go tops and blue. And I said, well, I've been. He goes, well, you need to go again. And he said, and if you need anything, just call me. So I went to my commander and said, I really want a different job. And he said, can't do it. And I said, well, then I guess I'll go tops and blue. He goes, well, I'm not going to let you go. I said, well, General Case already told me I could go.
Wow. Did you really
So
tell him that? You told him that?
yeah, yeah, because
Wow.
I was at the point where I was unhappy in there. I wasn't moving in the direction. And I knew at that point that was probably going to be it.
Right.
But so I ended up doing the 87 tour and I had just gotten married. But my wife was working also. She was also in the Air Force. So she's a retired lieutenant colonel. And she was actually going to Europe back and forth. And she was traveling all the time. So actually, even though I wasn't home a lot, she wasn't home a lot either.
Right.
So, so that first year, but that was a tough first year of marriage because I had just got married
Yeah.
and, but it was great. And the 87 show, it was really one of my favorite shows from my performance aspect.
Mhm.
I think probably, the better show was probably 83 musically, but 87, I love that show. So, and I liked 85 too. They all were great. But then I got out of the Air Force and I went to work for a contractor, kind of doing the same thing. And I did that for 20 something years, had my kids. My kids started playing basketball. I was doing a lot of comedy. I kept doing it on the side. I went to every, little hole in the wall comedy place in the East Coast. And
Specifically stand up, correct?
yeah, and I
Yeah.
was doing magic with it. And I played the guitar and I mean, I was doing a lot of the same stuff.
Right.
And, but that's a hard gig. I'll tell you, traveling around doing that, I probably have to tell you that, but it is a tough, tough deal. And so, my kids started playing basketball and I started coaching. And then as my kids got older, I started spending more time with them, less time doing performing. And then my kids finally they graduated. One of them went to the Coast Guard Academy. She's a lieutenant commander in the Coast Guard. My other daughter went to William and Mary, and she's works at Ernst and Young in New York City. And so now it's just me and my wife, and I coached high school basketball. I just retired. I had 5 years as a head coach, varsity. We went to states last year, so it was great. Stepped down, and so now I'm kind of looking at going back into a little bit more of comedy and doing some stuff again.
I would have never guessed in a million years, and I don't know why. I mean, it's not like I knew, your life story. I would have never guessed in a million years you would have become a basketball coach. And I don't know why I say that. It's just for some reason because I just know you as comedy and stand up and what you've done with Blue. I would have never thought in a million years basketball coach.
I think most of my parents that I coached this year would agree.
Well, you were doing something right.
Well, yeah, that's a whole different story, but that is things are really different now. I mean, when I grew up in the 70s, coach told you did it.
Yeah,
You just did it. You didn't. It's just
yeah,
everything's really different now, and
yeah.
it just and I'm a lot older, so I
Right.
mean, I was older. I could have coached some of the parents. That was the age difference for me. So yeah,
So on that thought, not to get too personal in your life, how old are you, Ed?
I'm 67.
67. Okay, I'm 63. I knew we I mean, that's not quite the same ballpark, but it kind of is the same ballpark. Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. So let's go back to the comedy stuff here before we start getting, because I got lots of questions about your tours and your Rogers and your Wilcos, but who was your go-to in your formative years, so your teen years, when you were thinking about doing the stand-up stuff? Who was your go-to comedians? Who did you gravitate to?
It's funny you asked because my idol for a long time was Jerry Van Dyke.
Mhm,
I loved him when I was a kid. He was on the Dick Van Dyke Show. He played Stacy,
mhm.
Dick Van Dyke's brother, which I don't know if you were at that worldwide, but he was a judge. He
Yeah,
was a judge one
I
year.
wasn't at that worldwide. What year was that worldwide?
Gosh,
I
it
don't
must
think it
have
was
been,
any of
I
mine.
think it must have been 80,
Yeah.
it must have been 87 or something, or
Yeah.
85. I don't remember now.
Yeah.
85. It was definitely
Yeah.
85. So he came and he said he had to audition for that part. Dick Van Dyke made him audition for that part,
Wow.
but he played the banjo and he was very, and I love that. And the funny, I started picking up the banjo. I don't play it very much now, but I was playing the banjo, and then Steve Martin came along,
Yeah.
and
Blew that
everybody,
right out the window.
yeah, you're playing the banjo because Steve. I said, no, I was playing the banjo before Steve Martin came along. I
Yeah.
know, he's a great banjo player, Steve
Yeah.
Martin.
Amazing.
And and I liked Bill Cosby a lot. I was influenced by that type of stuff. But I really liked a lot of the comedy magic stuff. I really just I don't know. I like the concept of doing all these different things. So I would, I can't really put my finger on anybody except really Jerry Van Dyke that I was just like, and then when he came to that talent contest, man,
Yeah.
that
No
was
kidding.
that your idol, right?
Yeah.
And he said something, I had a really good night that night. That show at 85, I really killed it. That's probably one of the best performances. And he came up to me and he said, I picked you for best of show. I didn't win it, but to
Wow.
me, that was all I needed to hear. Now he
Wow.
probably said the
Well,
same thing to everybody.
I can't even, well, it may be, but still, I can't. I'd still take it. I don't care if you
I
told me
took it. I
the
used to, it was
trombone
in all
player
my
did it.
notes. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
So like, was there any, like, I was really big in the Flip Wilson show.
I love that too.
I mean,
Oh, baby.
yeah, Red Skelton, all those cats.
Yeah.
Did you have any TV shows back in the 60s and the 70s that you really gravitated to?
So I grew up we're in Pennsylvania there wasn't a lot of you either had everything was cable, right?
Right.
So you had the major networks and I can remember watching Flip Wilson and I love The Odd Couple, I love that kind of stuff. But I really got into the old honeymooners. I
Oh,
love
yeah,
the honeymooners
yeah.
and they used to come on WPIX channel 11 out of New York City
Mhm.
and we got cable and that was it. And then I want to say about the time I was a junior or senior in high school, we started getting HBO and then we started getting all the HBO specials and the young comedian specials. And I was really influenced by a lot of that. I
Right.
thought that was like the really the coolest thing. And then when I went to the academy, I did some stuff out there. I mean, on the academy grounds. But then the crazy thing is, like, I didn't even write this down. It's kind of funny. I wrote a couple things down because there were some stories I wanted to share with you,
Mhm.
but I didn't think about this one. So I got to Boston, and when we were in Boston at Hanscom Air Force Base, there was a radio station, WVBF, had a class count competition. So I drove out and I won the preliminaries in my set. So I got to go back for the finals and I won it. And the grand prize was they sent me to California. I got to fly to California and do something and come back.
Mhm.
But then I got to go on the air on WVBF.
Oh,
And after that, they hired me. And I was a morning show guy with them while I was in the Air Force. Now that was really difficult because
wow.
I didn't want them to say my name or anything because I was really concerned that, people in my chain of command were going to get upset. But I would get up at 4 o'clock in the morning, go to the radio station. I'd be there until I had it worked out with my boss. I could come in at 8 or whatever it was. So I'd leave the radio station at 7:15 or something. But I was there for all the morning shows. And that was one of the most fun jobs I
What
ever
did
had.
you do? What was your gig during the shows?
I wrote comedy bits, I did voices, I sang songs, I
That
wrote,
sounds amazing.
it was really fun. And I got paid a lot. I got paid more doing that than I was being in the Air Force. It was, but the timing was wrong. If the timing had been right, I probably would have gotten out of the Air Force and just pursued that.
This is
But I
that. Yeah.
didn't.
Wow.
But then
Wow.
Thompson Blue came along, and then that gave me a different venue to do that.
Ah,
So
no kidding. Wow. That sounds like a sweet gig,
it
actually.
was. It was really fun. It was really
Wow.
fun.
Um, did you tell me? I mean, you've done so much, specifically talent, winnings, the MC. I mean, you've done so much, but I want to hear about your first journey up to your first making of tour. I know you touched on it a little bit. Did you did they have showcases back then when you did your first tour?
So Systems Command did not.
Okay.
So we went. So I really had no idea what was going to happen. I mean, I went to the base talent contest, and that was really fun, and and we had a pretty good team. I mean, Little Hanscom Air Force Base had a pretty good team.
Right.
We had this woman who played. I think back on this, and this was back when I was just making jokes about everything,
Mhm.
and she was a classical flautist. And so I remember after she was done, she performed, I forget what her name was, but I said, and that was, Marissa so and so
Mhm.
on the flute asking that musical question, beans, beans, the musical fruit, the more you flute, the more you eat, the more you flute, or something like that,
Yeah.
and and then the whole place came apart. She thought it was funny, but later on I'm like, okay, coming out of classical probably shouldn't
Yeah.
do.
A little edgy.
But then I got to Systems Command, and that was a different thing. And that was when I met Leon Johnson. And Leon, I think TA talked about him, very, very funny guy.
Mhm.
But again, I didn't really know what was going to happen, right? So then we get to Worldwide, and I remember that show, that group of shows, some of those acts they just blew me away.
Mhm.
And I felt pretty good about what I was doing in MC category, right? I had gone out because I mean, I had come up with about 50 bits, and I was just like, and back then you had no idea how long you were going to be out there. You might be out there for 30 seconds. You could be out there for 8 minutes. I mean, it really depended on what was going on backstage.
And so just real quick, so people understand, you weren't actually doing 4 minutes of comedy in a like the potpourri category. This was
Right,
stuff you were doing in between acts
right,
throughout the whole
right.
show.
Right. So like and they would let the singers sing in front of the curtain at Worldwide. But then if there was a band out there behind the stage, then they had to clear the band for
Mhm.
the next act. And
Right.
sometimes that would take a while. Or and there was a whole other thing that happened one time. It wasn't me, but I was out there a couple of times where you're out there and you're just waiting for this red light.
Yeah,
It's
right.
out
So
of the corner
right.
of your eye. And you have no idea when it's going to go on. But I got to Worldwide, and but I was feeling pretty good because I was really prepared and I had spent a lot of time work. And then TA walked out there,
Mhm.
and I mean, he didn't have any note cards. He came out, he knew everybody in the band, bam, 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 bam. And I was just like, oh my God, this guy is really, really good. And so, but then I got to the finals, and that was at the Dayton Convention Center. enormous crowd. They were bringing in all these celebrities. I remember the guy from Mission Impossible was there. Chad Everett was there. I can remember some of the because I had a little bit that I did at the beginning. I was the first MC,
Okay.
and so I got out there, and then I went a little long or something for one thing. I mean, I wasn't trying to go long. And then Tom Edwards comes around backstage and says, "We need to get these acts going. We need to get them going."
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I wasn't trying to go long. And then I went out and I was like, you know what? I'm just going to enjoy this, right? Because I don't know if I'll ever be here again. I'm not going to
Right.
rush this, right?
Right.
And and so I won, but I didn't make Tops in Blue. And it was I didn't know what the criteria was. I didn't know what they were looking for. I mean, I was not really a singer. I could sing, but I wasn't ever going to sing. I wasn't a dancer. I couldn't.
Right.
So, it was like, okay, well, I got to figure out what I need to do this. So, I went home and everybody talks about the call. You might get the call. Well, there was a guy named John Manaris, and I don't know if you've ever heard of John, but John was, again, really talented comedian. He passed away a number of years ago. He did this character called Super Sergeant. He was really, really good. And he had gotten selected to tour in 1982.
Right.
But he was at Pease Air Force Base, and they were hanging up one of those, 30-foot lame curtains, and he fell off the ladder, and he broke his leg or his arm or something. So I get a call from Air Force Entertainment,
Wow.
and you go out on the tour right now.
Mhm.
But I had this knee injury from the academy, and I had just wrecked it like a couple of weeks before, and I couldn't walk. And I was like, well, I got this knee problem. I said, I'll limp out. And he's like, nope, offer's over.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So I think they ended up bringing Leon Johnson out. But I went up to see, we went up to see John in the hospital, and he was like, you didn't fall too, did you? I said, no.
All right.
So the next year I was 83. And so I really worked hard, and that was the year I had two acts that made it to the finals that year. We had a Magic act and then an MC, and got to worldwide, and I made it, and Tom took me, um, and that was, and then you're there, and of course everybody's like, I'll do anything. Well, I'll sweep the floor. I'll do whatever, everybody says that, but then you get to staging, as you know, it changes because the demands are really, really difficult.
Mhm.
And Rich Nemeth was there with me. Rich Nemeth was selected, and Rich was just a really talented artist, and he did all our backdrops and everything else. But he and I would write and rehearse and go through all this stuff. And that year, I was really the straight man. I did some stand up in this show, but Rich was the funny guy and I was the straight man. But I fed him a lot of lines, and I thought we had really good chemistry, and it was a really good show. And I mean, but so my path, it took me 2 years to get there. I mean, I know some people never made it, but I just worked really hard, and then I just kept wanting to do the talent contest. So I didn't go again. And I mean, I went to the talent contest in 84, but I wasn't going to tour. And then I went and I toured in 85, and then I came home, and then I took a year off, and then I toured again in 87. And at that point, I kind of knew I was done. My
Yeah.
wife told me I was done.
Yeah. Yeah. Understandable. Yeah. I mean, did you,
But
did you have, uh, who was in the finals with you in your first finals? Who you up against?
TA,
Yeah.
yeah, T, so
It's so great. God, I
so
love to see those tapes.
So I would too. And it's really interesting because years later, I was very fortunate to just have made the final so many times. I
Mhm.
mean, I don't know. I just the
Well, how
gods.
many how many people were in the MC categories back then?
Oh, they were full. I mean, you'd have 15, 16 people, right? I mean, it kind
Wow.
of depends because
Through
you could
one
do five,
worldwide?
you could do 5 nights of shows. Those days there were there
Yeah.
were 5 nights of preliminaries, 2 shows a night.
Think about that, kids. 5 nights of shows. Wow.
Right? And then the finals at the
And then the
end,
finals.
right? So that was, there was a lot of MCs. I mean, there was at least 10, 12,
That's
yeah.
stunning, shocking.
Yeah,
Wow.
but some of them weren't very good, which is why Tom, I think, eventually said we got to move away from this because there were some people out there that would just stumble and just And, at the end of the day, as the MC, you're trying to be funny, but you also got to make sure you bring the act on,
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
and you got to make sure you know their name. I mean, I'm glad that you remember your intro, right? Because it
yeah,
was a memorable intro for you, right? But you're trying to make sure you're doing the right thing for everybody that's out there, and you go and you're trying to watch and dress rehearsal, and you're spending the whole day there watching everybody rehearse, and then you're trying to figure out what you're going to do between each act and how you're
yeah.
going to. And
And
I really
you're writing stuff while during the rehearsals. Yeah.
Yeah, and I had a lot of bits, but I really wanted to plan it because I knew, okay, I'll try to do this because maybe I'll do a song here because it's going to be longer and this is going to be longer and
Right.
um I mean I remember this wasn't me, but one of the great worldwide moments really involved TA, and this was a Master of Ceremonies category, and there was a guy from Alaskan Air Command. I wish I could remember his name, and he was really struggling. I mean, he came out and he opened up with "After the Lovin'." And he, oh, I sing you to sleep after, and then suddenly, about halfway through his show, the curtain broke. And so there he is. Now you got one of the guys who's really struggling as an MC, and now he's out there
Hmm.
indefinitely, right?
Yeah.
And so he's out there and so finally looks over at the band and he goes, "Hey, play After the Love." And so he starts singing it, and then he's singing and then he goes, "A little bit faster. Oh, I sing you to sleep after, a little bit faster. I sing you to sleep." And they're really flying, and the band's waving white flags and the whole thing. And then shortly after that, TA walks out on the stage.
Now, do you think he was directed to, or do you think he did it voluntarily?
No, he was working on staff at that particular contest.
Oh,
So
okay. I
TA
got you.
walked out.
Okay.
I think he was out there to help him out. And the guy's name was Ben. I remember the guy's name was Ben. And TA walks up and he's got a microphone and everybody's cheering TA. And he walks up and he puts his hand on Ben's shoulder and goes, "Ben, I just want to let you know it's going to be about another 5 or 10 minutes." He starts to walk off. And the place just came apart. And then Ben said,
That's great.
he said, "I want to do a quick impression." And he puts on TA's jacket. He turns around, and Ben was a white guy. And
Mhm.
he turns around and he smiles, and he's got like this.
Yeah.
And TA's looking at me with that look of his, that sullen look. And so TA puts on Ben's jacket and he goes, "Oh, I sing you to sleep after." It was really unbelievable. It's one of the ones I'll remember forever.
Yeah. It sounds magical.
So incredible. And it's a shame. I mean, but then that was probably the highlight of that guy's worldwide
Yeah.
because it was. But in that MC category, the weirdest things that were you there when Diana Ring sang? Were you there for that?
No. No.
Diana Ring, Glenn Ash was one of the judges,
Mhm.
and I was the MC for the show. And Diana Ring sang the song "If You Believe," right? If you ever, that was
Yeah.
like one of the songs that everybody would sing.
Everybody's doing it.
The stage had an kind of an apron that walked out, and the band pit was there, and then there were lights around.
Mhm.
And so I'm backstage and I can't see anything. I don't know what's going on. And I'm hearing Diana sing and I, and she hits that part, "Believe in yourself, da, 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 da." And she goes, "Not because I told you to." And then I hear this gasp, and I'm back. I hear this gasp. And then boom, "Believe in yourself." And the crowd is just going crazy, right? They're just,
Wow.
I'm going, I have no idea what's happened. I have no. So she finishes and comes off the stage, and I'm just in the moment. I'm like, wasn't that fantastic?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Yeah.
They're going crazy. Well, what had happened was as she was walking around the pit, she got to the corner and she stepped and fell into the pit.
I knew that's where you're going to go with this.
She fell into the pit, missed one note, boom, back up on the
I bet.
stage and finished it. And she made Tops in Blue because of that.
Probably looked like she had anti-grav boots and boom, boom.
Oh, and but that was a moment, and I didn't know it. I mean, I knew it later because people told me, but I didn't see it. I'd always wished that was a clip that they would show it worldwides later because I
Oh
felt
yeah,
like
yeah.
that's
That'd be
really
awesome.
what it's about.
Yeah.
You know, being
Yep.
able to something like that happens and you just
Spring
go for
back
it.
and start just go.
Yeah.
Wow.
But
Wow.
yeah, so that was, but that's how I got to Tops and Blue and it was great. And I mean, I'm very thankful that the program existed. I mean, Tom was always a tough customer. You know, I never really knew if he really liked me. It was one of those things. And because he would be kind of hard on you. You'd go up with your material and he'd say, "All right, throw out the junk, cut it in half, come back." You
Oh,
know?
see that's a great segue to my next question. When you were emceeing Worldwide, did you have to submit anything to Tom ahead of time?
No.
What about at shows?
No,
Any competitions?
in
Once you
all
got to the
no,
higher levels.
never, nobody ever asked for it. I don't remember them ever asking anybody. And
Yeah.
in the early days too, the crazy thing too was the acts in 1982 and probably until about 1984, 5 minutes long. They were
Yeah.
5 minute acts. They changed that to four later.
Mhm.
But yeah, there was nobody ever checked me. The only time I ever got checked, my wife was in Germany and I was doing I got asked to do humor for a dining out.
Oh,
And so they asked me to come in, and I was a civilian. And so I did the bad news. I mean, she worked at Bad Aibling Air Station in Germany. And so I did the bad news. And so there was a senior chief, or he was a army guy. I don't know, is whatever their rank is.
mhm.
And so he came up to me and he's like, "I need to see your material." And I said,
Oh,
"Nope." And he
wow.
said, I go, I don't, that, and he goes, "Well, I need to review it." And I said, "It's fine." And he goes, "Well, and I said, "Well, if you have to review it, then I'm out." I said, "I'm not, you know, I mean, I've done it so much time." Then there was a colonel, Air Force colonel that was there, and I talked to him, and he was like, all he said was, "You have anything offensive towards women? No. Do you have any racist? No. Do you have this? No. Okay, go." So they had seen me, and the thing is, I'd done a bunch of shows on the base, so that's the only time I've ever really been asked, ever. So, I mean, I work pretty clean. Even when I'm doing stand up out in the wild,
Mhm.
I still work pretty clean.
Pretty clean.
Yeah.
Did you, for your subsequent tours after your first one, did you have to compete to get to those tours? Or were you asked to
No, I
come back as a
competed.
performer?
I competed. Yeah. 85, when I made it. And then I was a tour director in 85.
Ah, that
And,
wasn't on your little resume thing there, I don't think.
yeah, I was a tour director, and that was kind of a tough tour. There were a couple of reasons, but it was overseas, and there were just some issues we had with the same issues as anybody else. But it
Every
was,
tour has issues. Yeah.
and then 87, I had told Tom, I mean, because with TA I was the OIC because I was the only officer on the
Mhm.
trip. And what people don't realize is even though TA is the tour director or whatever, if you're an officer, if something happens on that bus or with that group, you're ultimately I'm responsible, right?
Mhm.
I mean, it doesn't matter if I'm the tour director or not.
Right.
At the end of the day, I'm the guy who should be controlling it. It doesn't matter
Right.
And so the last tour I made, I told Tom, I said, I just want to go out and enjoy it, right? Because I said I really want to get a chance to go see something. And there was a guy that we had, Tarami Williams. Tarami was a great flute player, and he got hepatitis when we were in England early on.
Wow.
And so Tom moved me into the tour director spot. So I finished that year. I was a tour director for the rest of the year. And in reality, Tarami really didn't know what he was doing, and he's a great guy, but he really didn't have the experience. And then our logistics guy was a guy named Will Gaddis, and Will was an awesome guy, but he didn't know what to do. And then I was on the audio crew, and I was doing like everybody's job for a while. And I wasn't sleeping at all. And then finally, Will got his stuff down. I got relieved from the audio crew. so, so, but it was, those were great experiences. And I just don't think that, people really understand. I mean, today it's really hard to look at that and understand what that was all about.
I did for 4 months, I did tour director on the 97. I can tell you that was uh, the toughest thing I ever did with Tops and Blue was try to keep that team running. That I got one of these days I'm gonna have a tour director Tuesday podcast just to get a bunch of tour directors on here and talk about that's a tough gig, man. The tough gig. I'm sure at the end it's very rewarding. Mark Fletcher did a great job on 93, and but it's a tough gig. It's a tough gig.
Well, you just really, I mean, people don't realize that you can't get close to anybody. I mean,
Yeah,
you can, but you can't really.
yeah,
And everybody at some point in time is going to hate you because of the decision you're making. And you're trying to make good decisions for everybody. And I mean, I remember we on the two overseas tours, we got to Torrejon. And the first year we got to Torrejon, the woman that was working the rec center, who I had known her from Vegas from '83, and she came out to me. She said, "Hey, can you guys do a second show?" And I said, "Well," I said, "can you help me out with something?" Because we had to go. I forget
Zaragoza.
Zaragoza. We were supposed to go there the next day, and I said, "Is there a way that we can go to Zaragoza, come back, just come straight back here, and then we don't have to unpack our suitcases for like 4 days?
Right,
Basically, we can travel days in." And she goes, "I'll work out the lodging." I said, "Great." So Zaragoza wasn't super happy because we came and left, right? But for us as a tour, we did two shows, went right to Zaragoza, came back, and then they had like 2 or 3 days in Madrid. And so after that, then 2 years later, when I came back, she was like, "Hey, can you do it? Can you do two shows?" And I said, "Same deal." Yep, boom. So we did, and your cast doesn't know about any of that kind of stuff. I mean,
right.
you're not trying to, but you're trying to make it better for them. And but then you just have to work through stuff. There was a guy I remember he quit the tour like right before a show. He was like, "I'm done, I'm out." And he was a key part. He was a saxophone player. And so I'm talking to the band and said, "Okay, you guys got to rework all the parts and all this." And then right before the show, he steps on the stage. And so after the show, I remember I called him up in the office. We were in Turkey. I remember that's kind of funny. I remember that. And he came up and I said, "What do you want to do?" I said, "Here's what your options are." I said, I'm going to write a letter of reprimand and I'm going to put it in my briefcase. And if there's a peep out of you for the rest of the tour, I'll send that letter of reprimand home with you along with another one if you want to stay. I said, "But if you want to go home, I'll just let you go home. You can
Hmm.
just go home and no, don't worry about it."
Right.
He said, "I want to stay." And you know what? He ended up being one of the best cast members on the tour, right? I mean,
Sometimes
because
that's all it takes.
yeah, I mean, and
One
I wasn't,
shake-up.
yeah, you weren't trying to be a jerk. It was just like, but I need to figure out something.
Yep.
And as you know, the problem is you get out there and you have some serious trouble. You don't have the authority to send somebody home.
Hmm.
Tom's got to make that call, and it could take weeks,
Yeah.
and you're just like, so you got to just deal with it. And
You got to keep everything under the radar so the rest cast doesn't know. And
right, but I think we had successful tours. Most of our kids made it, and and I look back on it, and even people that I didn't necessarily get along with, I've connected with on Facebook since, and I
right.
think it's all been good. I think everybody kind of realizes, uh, when somebody doesn't do that, you want to tell them. Like we had a young woman that we sent home, and that was a really bad issue. And but we didn't send anything with her. We just sent her home. And then I got back to my base, and I got a phone call from her chief master sergeant asking me questions. And I said, "Okay, if we're going to go down this path, here's what happened."
Mhm.
And he said, "Well, why didn't you guys tell us that?" And I said, "Because this isn't for everybody. Not everybody can do this." I said, "This isn't the real world. We're all tight like that. And so he said, "Okay." And so that got dropped. But immediately I'm calling Tom. I'm like, "Hey, get ready. It could
Yeah.
be flying. But no, I mean, I think as a leadership, it was the best leadership laboratory I've ever been in. That's for sure as a tour director.
Yeah. No argument with that. No argument with that. Did you prefer the stateside or the overseas tours?
Well, I think the overseas tours were a little bit more fun because we had a little more time. You had a little more time off. '83 stateside, I mean, it seemed like we didn't get many travel days at all. And A couple of times we did, and I was one of these adventurers. We got someplace, I was like out. We had a travel day, I was going out. So there was Floyd Martinez was on that tour, and he and I and Melissa Shaner at the time, we would all kind of go out together and hang out and go do stuff. And but overseas, we just always had a little bit more time. And stateside, it was exhausting because you did a lot more shows too. I mean, at the time. And now, of course, later on, they did both, which I can't even fathom that. I just think that was probably got to be really, really hard. But
Yes. Yes.
but over those years, I had gone to every Air Force base in the world except we didn't the whole time we did not go to Little Rock that in 1983. But one of the places we did go, I don't know if you went there. Did you go to the United States Disciplinary Barracks?
I'm sure we did not.
So we went to the prison,
Where
and
is that at?
it's in Fort Leavenworth, Kansas.
Oh, Fort Leavenworth. Okay, that makes sense now.
And
Duh.
so we roll into that place, and they lock you in, and you're like, and and uh, and I remember, so Rich Neiman and I, like, we were seasoned because we'd done a couple outdoor shows where the crowd just didn't appreciate the stuff we were doing, and we kind of knew that, so we've kind of gone through that. But you get into Leavenworth, right? And we did two shows. We did 2 nights of shows
At Leavenworth.
because Tom had some other special show set up out in the Midwest. We were going to go to the next night. That was a critical show. And Tom was actually there for the second show at Leavenworth. We didn't know he was going to be there. And so we come out, and man, these guys are just screaming and yelling and booing and with the moment Tops and Blue comes on the stage.
Wow.
And then our women are out there and they're like, show us your boobies, all this.
Yeah.
It's just like,
Yeah.
and the girls are just like, oh my God, everybody's like scared to death.
Yeah.
Later on, the guy said, when they're loud like that, we know everything's okay. He says, when they
Oh,
get quiet is when we got to worry a little bit. But I had a line in the show, and I didn't think about it because you don't think about it. But the whole thing was, the end of the show, I'd say, if you aim high and aim straight, and as I'm saying, aim straight, I'm in the prison. I'm going, oh yeah, okay. And so, but I mean,
wow.
there was a funny bit that Rich and I did where, I mean, they were just relentless with us. Boo, boo, you guys suck. Boo, boo. But we did this little story, and Rich was reading this book, and he said, and the little man jumped up in the air, and I jumped, and he goes, twice. The whole crowd just erupts into laughter. Ah, 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 ah. It was just like it was cerebral. And the next night it wasn't as bad, but the first night we had a bunch of hardened criminals, and then the next night we had people that had either just come in or were getting ready to go home, getting ready to get out. And so there were just two different levels, and everybody has to wear a bracelet that, the kind of crime you do. Like if you wear a red bracelet, that means you had a violent crime, or
Right.
brown.
Well,
So, yeah,
my understanding is over the years, bases have to ask for Tops and Blue to perform with bases request TIB to they submit to Lackland and say, hey, or whoever at the in
yeah,
Texas and say, we want those guys to play, here at base X. I Leavenworth asked for Tops and Blue to play.
I
Must
don't
be,
I don't
right?
know. I don't know. I mean, I don't know if we were like the only group that went there, but we were there 2 nights in a row, and I guarantee you, everybody on that bus will remember everything that happened
That's
there.
incredible to me that they asked for a show, or maybe they didn't, and they just somebody maybe I don't know. That's something to look into. I'm gonna remember this conversation
Well,
about the Leavenworth shows.
yeah.
Yeah, wow.
So, I mean, we
Well,
had a bunch of unusual shows though, because we did one on the USS Coral Sea, which was crazy. We had to
oh, that must have been fun.
well, it was. We had to carry equipment up the planks, and
Yeah,
guys are coming off, and we're going on. And I was just, I'm the tour director, and I'm just waiting to hear this baloosh,
yeah,
hear
yeah,
something drop into
yeah, yeah.
the
There
train.
goes the soundboard. Yeah,
And we got there, and then our engineer was working hard. Our technicians were, and the power thing was such a huge issue on that boat, and it took a while. and the whole well the a number of people that were going to watch the show, they were already sitting down in the audience, so they
Mm.
were there and they were waiting. And our guy comes up, a tech guy comes and says, I don't, it's going to probably take another 15, 20 minutes. So I walked up to the captain of the ship and I was like, hey, just want to let you know it's going to be a little bit. And he goes, that's okay, they can wait.
Were they watching you guys set up?
Yeah,
What?
I mean, because it was taking us a little bit longer because it
Yeah.
was because we had to take the equipment to the side or to the dock side. Then we had
Uh-huh.
to put the equipment, unload the equipment off the truck. We had to put it into a landing craft, take it to this barge area, unload it, then load it up the back gangplank, take it to the far end of the aircraft carrier. And but it was a phenomenal show. And the crazy thing, so that was 1987. 1947 was the anniversary of the Air Force, but also the anniversary of the USS Coral Sea. That was the year it had gone, it had been, set out to sea. So we were celebrating their 40th year, and they were getting ready to go to the Gulf, and it was on our day off. It was really cool. I will say, your cast really comes through for you because I remember we were out sitting out in the bus, and they came and asked us to do that show, and I told the cast, I said, well, this is a day off for us, so this has got to be unanimous. I
Mhm.
said, can't, and somebody stood up and said, this is why we're out here.
Yeah.
Okay. So
Yeah.
everybody was like, "Yeah, let's go, let's do it." And then they got to eat. So they gave us, I wish I had mine still. They gave us these USS Coral Sea hats,
Oh, that would be so cool to still have.
officer hats. So they had the braid on them.
Yeah.
And then our guys got to eat in the officer mess. We got to,
Wow.
all of my, and I tried to explain to my guy, because I had a bunch of friends in the Navy. I'm like, I said, eating in the O Club is a little bit different. This is really different. This doesn't happen
Mhm.
unless people do not eat in here. And
Mhm.
and I just don't think they really had that appreciation. I certainly did. I was like, wow, this was
Was
just
that was that pre or post show?
that
Did
was
you guys
post
get it?
post show. Yeah.
Wow.
So so you come away from stuff like that, and you're just like, okay, you feel good. And then a few weeks later, we're reading in Stars and Stripes that they're sitting out in the Gulf. They're
Yeah.
in harm's way now, and you're like, okay, we were with them. We were
Yeah.
the last thing they saw before they went out. So it was really cool.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's amazing. Do you recall? I know you and TA on your first worldwide went up against each other. On the other finals, who did you compete against in the other finals?
Oh man. I I don't know MC wise. I can't remember, but I can tell you in 1983 in the non-musical potpourri, which gets me to a whole other thing because I don't even know what musical potpourri is to this day. But non-musical potpourri, it was kind of like, okay, but this young woman and I did a magic act and we lost. We lost to a guy that did ventriloquism.
Oh,
And he was really good, but we were really good. And but that's about and TAs, and that's about the only I lost comedy in 1987 to Linda Campbell. So I
oh,
remember that. I remember that. And that was the first time she'd ever done comedy, and she did a bunch of musical stuff. Um and then I just can't, for the life of me, I can't remember. But I was in the finals like the same night too. Most of those nights I had an act, and so I was double finalist in almost
yeah.
every did it. So, but I do remember years later, one of the judges, a guy named David Martin. I don't know if you remember David. He used to come almost every year. He and
I want
Sid,
to
and
say I recognize that name.
yeah, these guys and Glenn Ash and all these guys used to try to come pretty much
Yep.
every year. And David told me, he said, if you are the second MC and you're the stronger MC, then most of your acts will win.
Oh,
And I never really thought about it, but then I went back and looked, and I mean, I remember there was one night, I think in Charleston, the second show swept, except for one act. And I never would have believed it, but then I started correlating it, and I was
mhm.
like, I mean, I didn't think I was that much better than, but I think the energy in the second show, we were just really rolling. And
Yep.
but I think there's a lot of truth there because if you get that show going, then the adrenaline's going, everybody's going, and that first show, you got to really hit it hard, if you don't. And so anyway, but yeah, I just can't remember. I can remember people that competed, but gosh, I have no idea. That was also long ago. That was, 40
Yeah,
years.
I get it. No, I get it. Do you remember? Now I'm really digging. Do you remember when the first time that Tom, or matter of fact, any of your tours or any of your worldwides, when you got told that you're going to be on the team, how Tom called you up? Did he use your act and say your act, and then
No, I think he just called our names out,
oh,
right?
okay,
And
there wasn't any, you know, come
no,
do this with Tops and Blue. Don't do whatever you used to do. You
yeah,
always,
no,
you always had something really cool about your act to say, then switch it over to Blue.
I just don't remember that. That's such a blur now. I think I don't
To be fair, that's a blur with a lot of people.
yeah, I just remember when you got ready to go to the finals, he would have two envelopes and he'd say, "Okay, you're going to choose to see who chooses," right? So one would have one and one, two, and then you choose, and then if you got number one, then you got to choose first to determine. So it was
Yeah.
always kind of a crazy thing there. I remember the first time I ever saw Tom Edwards. And in 1983, and we were in the banquet room, and here he comes in his white suit, boom, boom, and it's like, I mean, it was this super intimidating character. It
Mhm.
was, and you're just like, wow, this guy. I don't know if you're a football fan, but to me, Tom Edwards was the Al Davis of, he he
That's a
he
good analogy.
he was like Al Davis to me. I mean, he just kind of ran everything. His hand was on everything.
That's a good analogy. That's a good one. I can remember that one. At any point in time, did you think about quitting on any of your tours?
No, I was pretty committed. I think, again, TA was such a great mentor for me because he'd been on some tours.
Mhm.
I do remember though that we did two shows in Andrews, and we weren't supposed to do two shows in Andrews. And back then, I mean, we were traveling. We just, you're doing show, 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 and we were exhausted, and I was exhausted. And we had to do back-to-back shows. And the first show, and I don't remember much about the show, but TA came down and he said, "Ed, what happened out there?" And I was like, I don't know. I said, I'm just, my energy's not. He goes,
I'm
"Let me
just
tell you."
tired, man. I'm just tired.
He said, those people in the audience could care less whether or not you're tired. They don't
Yeah,
care.
great point.
They don't care. He
Yep.
said, "You got to go do it. If you're going to be out here, you got to go do it. It doesn't
Right.
matter. I don't care how you feel. Just
Right.
go." And I've always remembered that because, and it's like that in anything you do, really. I mean, nobody cares how you, I mean,
Yeah.
if you're doing something, especially if somebody's paying money to see
Yeah.
you, or
Well,
they
when there's
don't,
an expectation, right?
they
Yeah.
don't care. So you need to go out and do your job. And but I never really felt like quitting or anything. I think there were, just like everybody else, you have these highs and lows where you're a little depressed, you're bummed out.
Right.
But I think for the most part, I really enjoyed it. I enjoyed being out there. Mm.
I'm sitting here going through. I screen printed the stuff that you sent me. Talk to me about, and I talked to a few people about this, the Bob Hope Show. I want your best memories from the Bob Hope Show.
So, okay, so there were a couple of different Bob Hope shows. Okay, so let me go back to the Bob Hope show that I was involved with because when they changed the name of the Lackland Performing Arts Center to the Bob Hope Center. So
Yep.
that's the Bob Hope show I did. Now there was
Yep.
another show years later that I'll tell you about too. I wasn't involved with that one, and then I think they did something with him another time.
Mhm.
But when we did that show, so I was living in Los Angeles, and Tom called me and he said, "Hey, can you come to San Antonio and do the show?" And I said, "Sure." I said, "But I have a gig on Saturday or Friday or whatever it is." I had a paying gig that I had signed up for. And he goes, "No problem. I'll send you back. Then you'll get on an airplane on Saturday morning, come home, and then the show is like on Sunday or something." So I said, "Okay." So I get there and I'm not in Tops and Blue. I think I was still in the Air Force, but if I wasn't, I was just freshly out.
Mm.
And so he's got this concept that he wants Bob Hope to feel like what it was like to be a service person in the audience watching one of his shows. That's what he's trying. That's Tom's thought.
Okay.
So Bob Hope's going to be in the crowd. And then he's telling me, okay, we're going to get this kid. We're going to get this kid actor. And I'm like, and who's the kid actor? She goes, well, we're going to get somebody. We're going to. And so I'm there the whole first day trying to figure out how to help him put this, the connection to all the parts of the show together.
Mm.
And he's like, well, we're going to get this kid. So we're brainstorming. We still don't have it all together. And then I fly home, I do my gig, I come back, and there's still no kid. There's no kid. There never was a kid. No kid ever showed up. Uh, so the whole thing though was mayhem because Bob Hope was coming in. I mean, we played outdoors at Lackland, and it was just a sea of people. I mean, I still have a video somewhere. There's a sea of people. I have a video of that show, and Tops and Blue they were doing their thing. And then I came out and he let me do stand up, but I was kind of doing stuff in between. So, I brought this guy. I had this guy with me, right? Rocky, right? Remember Rocky?
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So, one of Ward Grant was a guy who worked with Bob Hope, and Ward Grant was one of the talent contest judges all those years. So I had gotten to know Ward pretty well. And Ward was like, don't ever leave that out. And so I was like really nervous because I was going to be performing for Bob Hope. And so and I remember
Can't think of anything more terrifying.
yeah, and I did some of my song bits. And I mean, the crowd was just awesome, right? It was just awesome. And then what we decided to do was at the end, we were going to invite Bob Hope up to the stage and then he was going to do something, right? And this is kind of funny because
Did Bob
so
Hope know this?
yeah, yeah. Well, I don't know if he knew it because I hadn't talked to him, right?
Okay.
So and they had a little golf cart made for him that had looked like a jet, and it was like a F-16 and so they went down and got him and then they drove him back and so he's getting ready to come up and this is right before the Gulf War. I mean, this is like almost right before it all happened.
Mhm.
And the crowd, they start going Bob, Hope, Bob, Hope, Bob. It's
Wow.
so loud you can't hear. And then the crowd's going, USA, USA, USA. And I finally got to say, ladies and gentlemen, these are the words you wanted to hear. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Bob Hope. And he comes walking on the stage, and it is deafening, right? And he leans over and he said something to me. Okay. Now it was so loud that I'm not exactly sure what he said, but this is what it sounded like. And I told Tom this years later. I said, he leaned over, and what I thought he said was, you know, you're really not very good. but but I know that's not what he said.
That's not what he said. Come
That's
on.
that's what I thought I heard him say because
Yeah.
it was just so loud.
Yeah.
And Tom was like, he didn't say that. And I said, Tom, I have no, I'm sure what he said was you're really very good,
Yeah.
but I just heard that and it was still just an awesome moment. I have a picture somewhere of me with Bob Hope standing there. I think somebody was a presence of mind to take a shot there.
Mhm.
Um, and then he came and he did this bit. He read a letter and then he did some stuff. And then, he left and it was really hot in San Antonio. I want to say that was in the summer, late fall, early, fall.
Brutal.
And it was all outdoors, but and I remember some of the video we have Bob Hope getting into his cart. He's going, oh man, it's hot. He's walking off the stage. It's hot. But it was really just a phenomenal experience. And then a number of years later, I want to say in about 97, there was another Bob Hope show, and Tom called me and asked me to do that. And I had something else that was pending around that time. And I said, well, I said, I've got to commit on this other gig. So can you have somebody in the office call me and let me know? Now, there may be some disputes about this from the office. Nobody probably remembers, but I just remember saying, yeah, I just need to know by, Tuesday, whether or not you guys want me down there. Because they said they wanted it, but they were still kind of not sure.
Mm.
And so Tuesday kind of came and went, and I know things in that office are really crazy, right? So I was like, I wasn't going to get on the phone and call. So anyway, I ended up taking this other gig, and then about 5 days later, we got your plane ticket. Are you ready? And I'm like, I'm locked into something else.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
are you sure? And so that was really tough, and I felt bad about that, and I never really that was really one of the last times I had really you know really had any serious interaction with Air Force Entertainment, and they're tough to get a hold of. I mean, you can call some people can call down there, but I haven't talked to Tom much. I might have talked to him once or
I was
twice.
just thinking, now that you mentioned 97, I was just thinking the last time I talked to you was when I was with the 97 team when we did the flood up in Dakota.
So I remember that,
Yeah.
and I don't know if you remember the line when I said I came out and I had that thing where I was going to make something float. So I kind of make something float. Somebody goes, "How about my house?" or something like that. And the place, laughed, but that was pretty rough up there.
Dude, we did volunteer work. We were in people's basements, tearing down drywall, pulling out stuff out of basements. I've never seen anything like that. Well, there's been a lot since then, but that was crazy to me.
Yeah,
Absolutely crazy.
yeah,
Wow.
no. Yeah, that was really something. And again, I think a lot of people don't realize that those kinds of shows that Tops and Blue did, the kind
Mm,
of work that they were doing, much beyond just military stuff.
yeah. Yeah, a lot of people don't know that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. Um, I asked Libby Castle, my last guest, this. I'm going to ask you, matter of fact, this is going to be like a standard question I'm going to ask all priors moving forward. Who would you make the voice of Wilco?
The voice of Wilco.
We all know who the voice of Roger is. Who would you make the voice of Wilco?
Wow.
What do you think would be appropriate for the second place?
You mean somebody who's been in the program?
Who's been in the program? Yep.
You know, there's I I think I know what a lot of people would say. I'm sure a lot of people would probably say Jimmy Walker might be
Well,
one.
he did Roger for many years. That's why I'm asking about the Wilco thing because we know Jimmy did. He was the voice of Roger for a long
Yeah,
time. But there's never been
yeah,
a voice of Wilco, to my
yeah.
knowledge.
Um, Bernie Roan might be one. I don't
Okay.
know if it's Bernie or not.
Oh, I
Um,
I know Bernie in depthly.
yeah, I mean, I have a funny story about Bernie, by the way. I'll tell you
I
that.
want to hear it.
Bernie was on my tour in '87.
Uh,
Um, there was, gosh, Percy Lewis. I think a
mhm.
lot of people would say Percy
Oh,
was,
that was top of Libby's list.
yeah.
Percy.
And then my range of time though is, 80 to early 90s, right?
Mhm.
So I'd have to kind of look and say who would be in that
Yeah.
group. Jerry Jones, Jerry's been involved, although not as, but like she did all of our costumes and stuff. And now I
Mhm.
think she runs the whole thing now, right? So, I those are probably the people that I would most think because they were there. They were always there. TA even. I'd say
Yeah.
even TA. I'm not gonna say even TA. I'd say TA's up there with them.
Right. Yeah.
His commitment to what he's done with that program all those years.
Yeah.
So those would probably be my top picks, you know.
All right. All right. No, that's those are good picks. I just thought that would be an interesting question to ask the priors if they could pick a voice for Wilco. I just thought it'd be
So I
kind of
do
a
have
fun,
to tell you this
fun
story
thought.
about Bernie. So you'll
Yeah.
appreciate this. So we were in Crete, and it's funny how these things like as I was thinking about this and talking to you, I was like, oh, there's some stuff I wanted to share because some of these are stories I wish I had known. Bernie, his funeral was in Baltimore, and I didn't know that. And
Yeah. I went to his calling hours.
but I wish I'd have known. But the thing about Bernie, so Bernie was on my tour in 87. He was the performance coordinator or whatever that was called at the time.
Mm.
And we're in Crete and we're putting up those kind of those mini light towers. They're like these single hands with like,
Yeah.
and the wind is kind of blowing a little bit. And the base safety officer comes and I'm looking at Bernie and I'm facing the same way as the safety officer. And the safety officer comes up to Bernie and he says, I don't know about these light fixtures. I mean, I don't know about the safety of these things. And Bernie just like unloads on this guy. He's like, let me tell you something. Thompson Blue, we've never had any issues. We've never had any problems with safety. We've never did this. And he's just in his finger, he's railing on this guy. And as he's doing this, the stage is behind us. One of the light boxes catches on fire. It's like, as he's talking,
Just
and Bernie goes,
spontaneously catches on fire.
because we had Christmas lights that were inside of it. And
Uh,
suddenly, and here comes some of our guys. And Bernie is like not missing a beat. And another thing. And the safety officer just walked away. And I was just like, it was one of the funniest. It was like it couldn't have timed it any
right.
differently.
You couldn't have rehearsed that any better.
And Bernie was really, he was a great guy to have on the tour because he would tell you how it was. You could, and
Bernie
he
didn't
had,
have a filter. No
yeah,
filter.
and I ran into him years later because he was working for USO, and I was at Dulles Airport, and here he comes walking through with Howie Long, and he was taking Howie Long to someplace overseas. He
Wow.
was doing all that kind of stuff. But yeah,
Wow. My and I told this on a previous podcast. Um, when I went to Bernie's calling hours, um, this to this day, this still I get goosebumps just telling the story because it's an unreal thing for me. I'm standing next to Bernie. His brother's next to me. We're just sitting there looking at Bernie, and I said to his brother, he had something on his lapel. Oh, it was a USO. I think it was a US. Now I'm thinking. Remember, I think it was a USO pin. I said, you know what he's missing? And his brother says, what? And I said, he's missing a Thompson Blue pin. And I happen to have my one from my '93 tour on my lapel. And he goes, give him your pin. And I said, are you serious? He says, yeah, yeah. You don't put the pin on Brady. He says, you're right. He said that was a big, huge part of his life. Go ahead, and give him your pin. So I took my thing off my lapel, reached down, put it on Bernie's lapel, and Bernie's buried in my TIB pin.
that's awesome. That's
And
awesome.
just that whole event there, because Bernie and I had a very, and I've talked about this ad nauseum with other priors. Bernie and I had a very love-hate relationship over the years,
Yeah.
and but we finally reconciled uh, just after '97, and yeah, that was a really special moment for me to be part of that. So yeah, I can totally relate to Bernie.
Well, I didn't even know he had passed until after the fact, and I was like, oh, and then I live right here. It was like,
Yeah,
oh, I just felt so bad, and obviously recently going down to gyms,
yeah.
but
Well, this has been a complete joy, sir. I think you nailed everything I had on my list. You went right through it, man. I barely even had to
uh,
look at it because you went right through it.
well, I'll ask you this. So
Sure.
I don't know if you remember this, but I was thinking about all these things, and I kept thinking about like the best worldwide act I ever saw.
Oh,
You may not have seen the ones that I saw, but I will tell you that I don't know if you saw Eddie Rublinsky or not, or if you know who he is.
what year are we talking?
I want to say this, he was probably at the Charleston.
Yeah, that was before me. I didn't make it to worldwide till '91.
Yeah, so Eddie Rublinsky played the piano, he sang, and he played the saxophone.
Okay.
And the way that stage was set up, they had a baby grand off to the side, and he was sitting there and he sang at this moment, right? So he's sitting there, and all you see is him playing. He's what, and he could just sing the heck out of that song. And then it gets to the break, and he pulls that saxophone out, and he just delivers,
Wow.
delivers. And I just remember sitting there going, oh my gosh. I don't think he won Best of Show, but in my opinion, that was one of the most incredible moving acts for me. And my uncle and my aunt were, it was pretty, I will share this with you. I know you got to go, but
No, I'm good. Keep talking. I'm good, man. I love this stuff.
yeah. So uh, after I stopped competing, my aunt and my uncle ended up being judges at the talent contest.
Shut up.
My aunt was a voice teacher in Nashville. And so she actually was the one who got Mary Ann to come to that worldwide. Or Mary Ann. So the woman who
He
played
was at
Mary,
my worldwide in '91.
yeah, so Mary Ann was Phoebe's student. And so they were trying to find some celebrity judges. And what Phoebe, her clients were Marianne, I think Kathy Mattea is one of her. But I mean, if you went into her house, you'd look and like the whole wall, Rosanna Cash, all these. She lived in Nashville. She had all Ronnie Millsap, all these, you know.
Mhm.
And so my aunt and my uncle were both judges at the talent contest that year. And since I wasn't competing, I got to go behind the scenes and listen to those judges talk.
Oh,
And
then I've got a follow-up question. Go ahead, keep going.
it was an incredible thing because when they got to deciding who was going to be in the finals, right? Because the scores, I mean, yeah, it's scoring, but it's also there was a lot of this going on. You know, they were trying to figure out who the best acts were, and they would deliberate on it. And and my uncle was like, I remember there was a saxophone player that he wanted. He was like, I want that guy in. He says, I don't care about that. I want that guy in, right? And they would just, it was really crazy. That meeting went late, late, late into the night. Now, I don't know if that was a typical, but I got to believe it was
Well,
because
so how did the judges, and this to this day is still a mystery, and I was gonna eventually talk to Tom about this. Right there, right, no, hang on, right there is my judges special recognition award.
yeah,
How did the judges decide? So that was at the '91 talent show. I got the judges special recognition award for my act.
yeah.
How did they come up with the judges special was it judges that said I want him in the finals? No,
So,
how did they figure that out?
so if I recall, to the best of my knowledge, what happens is once they have the finalist,
Mhm.
then each judge pick. So whoever gave you that, that's the person that picked you for that.
So it wasn't like three, okay, let's say there's five judges. So it wasn't like two out of the five said, I think that guy should be in the finals. And they said no. So those two said, let's give that guy the special recognition award.
Well, or somebody who was fighting for you
Yeah.
said, "No, I'm gonna give it to him." Like,
Interesting.
yeah. And and there's different reasons. Like Diana Ring got one. I mean, Diana Ring was not the third best. She wasn't probably even in the top 10 acts that year. I mean, she
Mhm.
was a good performer, but the fact that she fell into that pit and got back out, that
Yeah.
Glenn Ash was all over that.
Yeah.
He's
Yeah.
like, bang, that was why she
That
got
makes
back.
total sense. Yeah.
And so, and rightly so. And it was, and to me, that's kind of what those awards are about: talent, about somebody that, you could tell they worked hard. They probably should deserve to be in the finals, or there's another quality, one of the
Mhm.
two, right? There's
Yeah.
something else that they saw that was just above and beyond. And, but to best of my knowledge, that's the way it worked.
Wow.
TA,
It's been a complete mystery to me this whole time.
yeah, well, it's so funny because so TA went on staff uh, after our worldwide talent competition.
Mhm.
So if you go to TA's house, so my first year, 1982, the Roger statues that they didn't come out right or something. So we got our statues look like that with the Roger on it, not the Will, or
Uh,
whatever. Roger's
yeah.
probably the same thing, but it says, first place or whatever. TA, though, he won for comedy that year. But if you go to his house, he's got a stand-up Roger because he just swapped his out and took one. So he's got like, four Rogers or three, whatever he's got, and it's on his house. So we laugh about it. But he reminds me over and over again that he went and dug out the scores for when we went head to head. And he said,
Oh,
Ed, you beat me by 1 point. And I said, point,
Really?
buddy.
1 point or 100 points, doesn't matter.
That's right. So yeah, but I think the behind the scenes stuff, I mean, there's definitely, these judges are really they get close. They really like an act and they're trying to, lobby for it.
Mhm.
And definitely see that. And David Martin, so it was really interesting because he used to do he judged Star Search. I don't remember the old TV show Star
Oh yeah,
Search.
yeah, yeah.
Was before, for anybody that's watching, that was pre-American Idol. That was kind of
Ed McMahon.
the McMahon.
Yep.
And there were a couple of people on. There was a singer that came on and just won week after week after week after week. And David Martin told me, he said, that show is fixed. And I was like, what? And he goes, well, it's not fixed in the sense that they tell us who to vote for. It's fixed in the sense that they're not going to put somebody up again. Once they get somebody in there that they want to keep, they don't
Mhm.
put somebody up against them that they think can beat them.
Really?
So they could just keep, that was the way he said that's the way Star Search was working at the time.
Wow.
So, I mean, obviously that's hearsay. So, I don't
Yeah,
want to get liable on that.
yeah.
Yeah, but he was, he shared that with me and I was like, wow, I always thought that was, but it does make sense, right? Because if
Right.
you're trying to make sure that you have the right audience or that you want different groups of people to, you're trying to keep it as diverse as possible, then you can do all that, right? And you're not
Right.
really not cheating, you're just kind of gaming it a little bit.
Yeah, that seems a little gamey. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, and but I always felt like that, I always thought that the Air Force Talent Contest, for the most part, I always thought they got it right. I
Mhm.
mean, I mean, I don't look at my own act, but I look at the people who won, and I was like, yeah, I mean, there were always some surprises, but then the person that won, you're like, okay, well, they were really good though. You
Yeah.
go back and
Yeah.
you watch it, they were really
Yeah.
good.
Wow.
So,
I would be remiss if I didn't touch on your Golden Roger. And I've been
yeah.
asked a lot of the folks that are in the GRs, um, what was it like that moment when you heard your name?
Well, I was really shocked. In the moment, uh, I
Or what
had
year? What year did you receive that? I don't mean to interrupt you, but what year did you receive that?
92, maybe. I don't remember. 91, 92. I don't remember.
I think it was at one of my talent shows.
And I don't know. It's over there. I could go look, um, but I remember when I got it, there was something interesting because I had been lobbying for Rich Neiman to
Mhm.
get one. And there were some issues with just some things that were going on, and there were there were reasons that Rich had not been recognized. And Rich was just like he's the reason, not the reason, but he had a big part of doing that halftime Super Bowl show. I mean,
Mhm.
he built the model and all this great stuff, and I mean, he really did a lot of work for Tom. Tom did all the heavy lifting, but Rich was right there and designing, and Rich was just spending a lot of time at Air Force Entertainment.
Mhm.
And I just remember when I got my Golden Roger, my thoughts were really about Rich at the moment. I think I said
Wow.
something about it. I think I said, that how much Rich really deserved to have one of these or something like that. But I was just moved. I think I would probably just don't remember much about it. I just
Yeah, that's one of those things that you probably, it's a blur, probably.
Yeah, but I was very honored to, I had spent a great deal of my life at that point. I think it'd been about 10 years I was out of the Air Force and I was coming to every Air Force talent contest. I mean, I wasn't getting paid for any of that.
Mhm.
I just would take vacation from my job and go do it.
Right.
If Tom called me, I'd do it. And I did that really until we went to Germany. And then when we went to Germany, I was too far away, and then came back and I did a couple things for him. That was when I came back. I think we did the deal in North Dakota for the
Yeah.
flood.
Yeah.
And I think I went back to a couple of worldwides. I think I did something at Andrews Air Force Base. It seems like there was a worldwide or something happened at Andrews.
Mhm.
That was right down the street.
Yeah.
And but it was, yeah, it was a great moment. And that list of people that's on that with me, I toured with a bunch of them. I want to say, well, Bernie is on that list. TA is on that list,
Mhm.
obviously. Tom's on that list. I can't remember if Jane McNulty is. It seems like she is.
I want to say yes.
Jane sat next to me the whole time. And is Tommy Mason on that list? Do you know if Tommy?
Oh, that's a good question. I don't know. Maybe.
But Tommy toured with me too.
Mhm.
In fact, in 1985, Rhythm of the City, he played a cop, and I had to run out between, and he was dancing, and he had a billy club, and he came out, and as he turned, and this is a real cop's billy club, boom! It hit me right in the face. I'm bleeding like crazy. I run off the stage. I'm like putting talcum powder, I think, because I got to run
Right.
out. And I'm like, oh, and I'm turning my face this way because I got like blood, But that's my Tommy Mason story. But yeah, I mean, there's just and there's a lot of people too that probably should be on there that aren't.
Mhm.
But I feel like that's kind of one of those cool things that's of all of the stuff that I have, that's
Mhm.
really the one I display. The rest of the
Yeah.
stuff I don't hang up. But when I told my wife, I said that's the one I want. So,
Yeah.
I don't want anything to happen to that one. So,
Yeah.
you know.
Well, you absolutely deserved it, sir. I mean, in my mind, you're one of the cats, dude. You're one of the legends in our little family. I mean,
Well, I don't know about
again,
that.
I swear to God, I tell your story about how you introduced me at least once every 2 weeks, if not more often. It just tickles me to death, especially since I'm a big Star Trek nerd anyways. That helps. So when I start talking Star Trek with somebody, I get tossed over to Ed Knox introducing me on
Well,
stage.
I see you're wearing your shirt, by the way. I can't fit into mine anymore, but I still got it. And
Okay, nice.
I went in the closet and I found this. And this was like, I don't have my other one, but this is, you remember when you guys get these? Like these
Oh yeah,
jackets
yeah.
that, these were so
Tour
cool
jacket.
because
That's your tour jacket, right? The yeah.
jacket. And I remember watching them make that. We walked in with before they were finished, and you were watching them, hand do the
In Korea.
then yeah, and
Yep.
they'd spell countries wrong or something. Look, Greece would be spelled Grece or
Yeah.
something. But yeah, I mean, I still have a bunch of that stuff. But anyway, but what a pleasure. I was just trying to look. I think I kind of hit all the things I wanted to tell
Oh, you did great. You did great,
uh,
Ed.
um, but I really I watched a bunch of these, and I think you talked to Daryl Harris, who was on my tour,
Mhm.
and and I was just really lucky. I think it's too bad that the service doesn't have at least a venue for people to perform like this,
Yeah.
even if it's a worldwide talent con. I know it'll never happen again in today's era
Mhm.
because the budget, people just look and they say, oh, that's just stupid. And I don't
Yeah.
think they realize, here's the last story I'll share. But so in 1987 was my last tour. And so fast forward at least a year, maybe a year and a half. So I'm at LA Air Force Base, and there's a place called Fort MacArthur that's kind of a satellite area of Los Angeles Air Force Base. And there's a little club down there. And I happened to be down there. I don't know if I was performing or doing something. And there was a master sergeant that was in uniform, and he was sitting over getting a drink. And he walked over to me and he said, were you Thompson Blue? And I said, yeah, I was. He goes, were you Thompson Blue 1987? And I said, yeah.
Oh,
Did you come to Diablo? And I said,
yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
I've been to Diablo. And he goes, well, I was there. He goes, I was there when you guys came through, and I remember you. I remember the show. And he goes, I just want to tell you this. He goes, I hated it there because I hated it. I hated being there. I hated everything about it. I couldn't figure out I was ready I was done with it. I was done with the Air Force. He goes,
Mhm.
then you guys rolled in. You guys rolled in, and there were more of you than there were of us. and you did that show. And he goes, and it was just, I don't remember what he said, but he was like, it's such a kick-ass show or something. And he
Mm.
goes, really fun. And he goes, and after that night, I thought about it and I said, if the Air Force thinks enough to send you guys to me here, then maybe I should give this another shot.
Oh,
He re-enlisted
wow.
Master Sergeant, right? He was, an airman first or whatever it was at the
Huh?
time. And so I look at that and I'm like, if we didn't affect anybody else in those other three tours,
Yeah.
that guy's story right there is like, that's why you go out. That's why you go out because there are people out there that were just miserable. And, and you don't want them to hate their life, hate their job, hate the Air Force, and then suddenly you kind of get them juiced up again,
Yeah. Get them. We used to call it reblued.
Yeah, and I
Yeah.
know that you've seen it when you're up there singing "God Bless the USA" in a place like Greece or some of the other places where they're not even allowed to fly in America,
Yeah. Uh-oh.
and you and,
Yeah.
and you look out and there's just crying, they're just tears, and you're just going, it's just an emotional event, and it really is. It's really special, and just to have been a part of that, and that's why when people would say, "Oh, you guys, you did it was like you have no clue," but I'm not going to get into that
Yeah.
discussion about
Yeah.
how hard it
Don't even
was.
go down that rabbit hole. Well, people didn't understand our folks did, but whether it was us or the singing soldiers or whoever, our job was to let people forget about life for an hour and a half.
Yeah.
That was our thing. Forget about life for an hour and a half, maybe an hour 27, depending on how much espresso the drummer drank. But it was that was our mission. So they could just forget about life for an hour and a half and be entertained and maybe re-enlist.
Right.
It's amazing. That's amazing.
Well, before I go, I just want to give a quick shout out to all my 83, 85, and 87 castmates. And by the way, one guy who was on two of those with me was Terry Weeks, which is crazy.
Yeah.
And everything that happened out there was great. I mean, I know there were some tough moments, but I just appreciated everything that everybody did all those years because it was really something. It
Yeah.
was really
You would I'm guessing you wouldn't have changed anything for the world.
No, I wouldn't have. I think that it was a great learning experience. I used to tell people I was the highest paid comedian, you know. I was the highest paid amateur comedian in the world.
That's you know what? That's probably true at that point in time, right?
Yeah, it was. It definitely
Yeah.
was. So I mean,
Wow.
I had a paycheck and you just really learn. I'm sure as a musician, you learned a lot out there, right? You learn how to deal with stuff and just how to just plan all those shows and how to make them fun. I mean, I think about that. I was watching The Temptations the other day and I'm thinking, how many times has Terry Weeks done My Girl?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Thousands, thousands,
Thousands. Yeah.
right? And yet it looks fresh.
It looks fresh. Yeah. Exactly right.
I'm watching him do those dance steps, and I'm going, yeah, you know, those are the same steps he did Tops and Blue. So it's
Yeah.
like, and he's my age.
And it still works.
Yeah, and it's
Oh,
just so much fun, and to look at that. I tell my kids that, and I'm sure you've heard the Terry Weeks story, but that was just I tell my kids about that, and it's just phenomenal. The whole thing, it's just to have been around, and I missed Sinbad. He came before me the year before me, but I had a chance to meet him, and it was just really great. I mean, all
I
these.
I think Sinbad, if I remember right, I'm sure somebody from '97 or the agency will correct me on this. I think Sinbad was supposed to be at the flood show in the Dakota. I think
Oh,
he was supposed to be there
well,
for
then they
that.
got me.
Well, I think what I remember right, I remember both of you were supposed to be there.
Uh,
That might not be right, but I think both of you were supposed to be there.
you know what? There's a really good chance because I think he would do almost anything if
Yeah.
somebody asked. Now I think he had a stroke not long ago,
Yes.
and so I haven't been following him that closely, but I know he and TA are pretty
Yeah.
close
Yeah. Yeah.
relationship. But yeah, but I mean, I had a long chat with him. We sat and waited for an airplane after Worldwide one year, and it was funny because people were walking by, and somebody came by and said, "I love your show," but they had an accent. He goes, "Where are you from?" And they go, "Australia," and he goes, I'm not getting that residual check. He wrote it down.
Yeah, any other countries you want to let me know?
It was,
Wow.
he was really funny guy.
Yeah.
Funny guy. I mean, he was the funniest guy just to sit and talk to. I mean, I'm not, I think sometimes people are disappointed. I mean, they come to me and like, well, you're not very funny. And I'm like, well, I'm pretty serious. I think a lot of comedians are pretty serious
Mhm.
people normally, and I think, but when we get together, like, there have been times when, so I was telling you one thing, we had this little issue before we started. So anybody who's online, we were trying to connect and I had to go through and reload all my software. Well, TA and I had to do a video a while back and it was a video together and it was a Zoom and we were facing each other. And then it took us, it's like a 15-second video and it took us, 20 minutes to do
Mhm.
that. And then I said, okay, TAC. And about 2 seconds after I get off the phone, he calls me, Ed, we got to redo it. We were looking the wrong way. Now we got to shoot it this
Yeah,
way.
you're opposite each other. Yeah.
Oh, we shoot it again. He's like, I go, okay, great. It takes us another 15 minutes to do like 15 seconds, right?
Yeah.
So I hang up. Hey, Ed, this the sound wasn't working. So, so we do it again. I'm not kidding. So we do it again. I leave, and now it's about 5 minutes has passed. I
Oh no.
didn't push the record button
That's happened to me a few times.
4 times. We did it. We did that video 4 times, and so it was pretty funny. But yeah, so I really appreciate. But I appreciate what you're doing. I think keeping us alive, keeping the program alive. This is awesome.
That's why I did this. I got to thinking about this. Because I did a podcast, or I still do a podcast, uh, where a high school buddy of mine who got me into bass playing, we talked to our high school graduates to see what they've been doing since we graduated school. And I got to thinking, you know what? That would be a great thing to do with priors to find out, what's going on. So that's why I created this.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Well,
I
you're
love
doing
I
a
love the
great job.
reconnectivity to this whole thing.
So, but anyway, thank you so much for including me in this. It
Oh,
was
my
really,
pleasure. My pleasure.
and
Yeah.
so you're still
You
playing.
you are high on my list, sir.
What you're still? I see you got all the equipment behind. You're still playing, right? You're still doing your.
I'm not in any bands. I just play enough to know that I can still play. I'm not in any bands. I'm 63. Bands at my age, logistics, craziness. I'm fully retired. Music is not like the part of my life like it was back in the day. So
Thank you so much, and
yeah, no, thank you, Ed, and I appreciate your time again. I apologize for the 24-hour delay. Much love to you, old friend. Thank you
yeah,
for introducing me in '91. It's one of my best stories ever.
and Ensign Leibowitz beamed down from the planet.
Ensign Leibowitz. Which
Which
one
one's
dies?
not coming
All
back?
right, Ed. Thanks again, brother. Appreciate it,
Right,
man.
sir.
Ed Knox, folks.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ed.